Quadratic equation is one that is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c represent numbers. But in a quadratic equation, we will always have a term that has got an x squared, an x term, and a number term. In order to solve a quadratic equation, we have to make sure that it is first equal to 0. So in this video, we will be looking at how to solve quadratic equations where the coefficient of x squared, meaning the number that's before the x squared, is equal to 1. Factorising a quadratic equation means that we are trying to put it back into its bracket form. So we can start by putting two brackets, and the first term of each bracket will be x, since the unknown letter that we're looking for is x. We then have to look for which two numbers, when multiplied, give us 16, meaning our number terms. So we're looking for two numbers that give us a product of 16, and those two numbers should give us a sum of the coefficient of x, which is 10 in this case. So we can do this by first looking at the factors of 16, and the factors of 16 are 1 and 16. 2 is divisible by 16, and we've got 2 and 8. 3 is not divisible by 16, but we've got 4 and 4. So we can stop there, and we can see that if we add 1 and 16, we get 17. And if we add 2 and 8, that gives us 10. So the factors that multiply to give us 16, but also add to give us 10, are 2 and 8. So we will be using 2 and 8 for our factorization. And what we are going to do is simply put plus 2 in the first bracket and plus 8 in the second bracket. And this equation is equal to 0. So we can now separately equate both brackets to 0. And in the first bracket, we have x plus 2 is equal to 0. And in the second bracket, we have x plus 8 is equal to 0. And we can now solve these separately in order to get our solutions for x. So if x plus 2 is equal to 0, that means x in the first bracket would have to be minus 2. And if x plus 8 is equal to 0, that means x is equal to minus 8. So we should always remember that in a quadratic equation, we will always have two solutions. So what we have done here is we have first factorized the equation by putting it in the bracket form, and then used this factorized form to solve the equation to get solutions for the unknown letter. So for number 1, we have to factorize and solve x squared plus 6x plus 8 is equal to 0. So we first need to look for two numbers that multiply to give us 8, and those same two numbers need to add to give us 6. And we can do this by looking at the factors of 8. So we've got 1 and 8, and we've got 2 and 4. And the numbers that also add to give us 6 are 2 and 4. So we could use these for our factorization. And we are first going to start by putting two brackets. And the first term of each bracket is going to be x. And then we can simply put the factors that we have found. So the first one is plus 2. So we could put plus 2 in the first bracket and plus 4 in the second bracket. And this is equal to 0. So we have factorized this equation, and in order to solve it, if x plus 2 is equal to 0, that means x has to be minus 2. And in the second bracket, if x plus 4 is equal to 0, that means x is equal to minus 4. And these are our two solutions for number 1. For number 2, we have to factorize and solve x squared plus 5x plus 4 is equal to 0. So we need to look for two numbers that give us a product of 4, meaning multiply to give us 4, and the same two numbers need to add to give us a sum of 5. So looking at the factors of 4, we've got 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. And the numbers that also add to give us 5 are 1 and 4. So we can now factorize this by putting x as the first term and then x plus 1. And for the second bracket, we are going to put x and then plus 4. and this is all equal to 0. So this is now factorized, and if we want to solve it, we can see that if x plus 1 is equal to 0, that means x has to be minus 1, and if x plus 4 is equal to 0, that means x is equal to minus 4. So here for number 1, we have to factorize and solve b squared minus 5b plus 6 is equal to 0. So we're looking for two numbers that give us a product of 6, and we're looking for two numbers that add to give us minus 5. So we have to be very careful when we've got a negative sign. We must include the negative sign. So looking at the factors of 6, we've got 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. However, when we are adding, we can see that we need to be getting a negative number, and we know that when we try to get a positive answer for a multiplication, either we have to multiply two positive numbers or two negative numbers. Now, none of these factors, as they are, would add to give us negative 5, which means we would now have to look at the negative factors of 6. So we can do negative 1 times negative 6, and we could also do negative 2 times negative 3. So if we now look at which of these add to give us negative 5, 1 and 6 adds to give us 7, so it can't be that. 2 and 3 adds to give us 5, so it can't be that. Negative 1 plus negative 6 would give us negative 7, but when we add negative 2 and negative 3, we do get negative 5. So we are going to be using negative 2 and negative 3 because it multiplies to give us 6 and it also adds to give us negative 5. So we can factorize this equation by putting b as the first term of the bracket. So we will have b minus 2 in the first bracket, and in the second bracket we will have b minus 3. This is now factorized, and in order to solve it, we can see that if b minus 2 is equal to 0, that means b would have to be equal to 2. And if b minus 3 is equal to 0, then b is equal to 3. And these are our two solutions for number 1. For number 2, we have to factorize and solve x squared minus 7x plus 10 is equal to 0. So we need to look for two numbers that multiply to give us 10, and those same two numbers need to add to give us a sum of negative 7. So if we look at the factors of 10, we've got 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. But because our sum has to be a negative number, that means we have to look at the negative factors of 10. So that will be negative 1 and negative 10. But if we add this, that gives us negative 11. However, if we add negative 2 and negative 5, that gives us negative 7. So we will be using negative 2 and negative 5 because that multiplies to give us 10 and also adds to give us negative 7. So we can now factorize this as x minus 2 and x minus 5. This is now factorized and is equal to 0. So to solve it, x in the first bracket would have to be 2, and x for the second bracket would have to be 5. For number 1, we are factorizing and solving p squared minus 10p minus 24 is equal to 0. So we need to look for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 24, and the same two numbers need to add to give us negative 10. So we can first do this by looking at the factors of 24. So we've got 1 and 24, we've got 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Now, because we are multiplying to get a negative number, that means only one of the factors would have to be negative. To decide whether the smaller factor or the bigger factor is going to be negative, we have to look at the sum. We are adding to get a negative number, which means the bigger factors would all have to be negative. So if we look at adding 1 and negative 24, that would give us negative 23. If we look at adding 2 plus negative 12, that gives us negative 10. So those are the two factors that we are going to use. So we can now factorize this by putting p plus 2 in the first bracket and p minus 12 in the second bracket. This is equal to 0 and it's factorized. So to solve it, if p plus 2 is equal to 0, that means p is equal to minus 2. And if p minus 12 is equal to 0, that means p is equal to 12. For number 2, we have to factorize and solve y squared minus 12y minus 64 is equal to 0. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us minus 64, and the same two numbers need to add to give us minus 12. So we're looking at the factors of 64, which are 1 and 64, 2 and 32, 4, 16, 8 and 8. So because we are multiplying to get a negative answer, one of the factors would have to be negative, and because we're adding also to get a negative answer, that means the bigger factors would have to be negative. So if we put a negative sign by all the bigger factors, for 8 and 8, if one of them is negative, 8 plus minus 8 would just give us 0, so that's definitely not going to work. But if we add 1 and negative 64, that gives us negative 63, so that's not going to work. If we do 2 plus negative 32, that gives us negative 30, so that's also not going to work. But if we add 4 and negative 16, that gives us negative 12. So the two factors that we will be using are 4 and negative 16, because they multiply to give us negative 64 and also add to give us negative 12. So we can now factorize this as y plus 4 and y minus 16 is equal to 0. So if we now want to solve this, we can say y is equal to negative 4 and y is equal to 16. For number 1 here, we have to factorize and solve the given equations. But as we can see, in this equation for number 1, the equation is not equal to 0. In order to solve a quadratic equation, we have to make sure it is equal to 0. So in order to solve this, we are first going to have to bring everything onto one side in order to equate it to 0. So we're first going to minus 13m squared on both sides. We are going to plus 11m on both sides. And we are going to minus 21 on both sides. So if we now simplify this, on the left-hand side, 14m squared minus 13m squared is m squared. We don't have an m term on the left-hand side, so we're just going to have plus 11m. And 49 minus 21 gives us plus 28. And now on the right-hand side, we will have 0. We can now easily solve this by first factorizing it. So we can first look for two numbers that multiply to give us 28, and the same two numbers need to add to give us 11. So looking at the factors of 28, we've got 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7. And the ones that also add to give 11 are 4 and 7. So to factorize this, we can write it as m plus 4 and m plus 7, and to solve it, we equate it to 0. So for the first bracket, m will be equal to minus 4, and the second solution will be m is equal to minus 7. For number 2, we can also see that this is not equal to 0. So again, we are going to bring everything onto one side to equate it to 0. So first, we are going to minus 9a squared on both sides. We are going to plus 9a on both sides, and we're going to minus 18 on both sides. So 10a squared minus 9a squared is a squared. We do not have an a term, so we're just going to write plus 9a. And 36 minus 18 is plus 18. 9a squared minus 9a squared is 0. Minus 9a plus 9a is also 0. And 18 minus 18 is also 0. So on the right-hand side, we can just put 0. So we can now factorize this by looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 18. And the same two numbers need to add to give us 9. So looking at the factors of 18, we've got 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. And the two factors that also add to give us 9 are 3 and 6. So we can now factorize this by writing a plus 6 in the first bracket and a plus 3 in the second bracket. And to solve it, we put it all equal to 0. So for the first solution, we will have a is equal to minus 6, and our second solution will be a is equal to minus 3. So here are a few practice questions that you can try, so please feel free to pause the video and try them independently if you wish. For number 1, we have to factorize and solve x squared minus 8x plus 12 is equal to 0. So first, we are going to look for two numbers that multiply to give us 12, and those same two numbers need to add to give us minus 8. So we need to look at the factors of 12, which are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So we are multiplying to get a positive number, but we are adding to get a negative number. So that means both the factors either have to be positive or negative, but in this case, because we are adding to get a negative number, we are going to look at the negative factors of 12. So now if we look at which one adds to give us negative 8, negative 1 plus negative 12 is negative 13, but negative 2 plus negative 6 gives us negative 8. So these are the two factors we'll be using, and we can now factorize this equation as x minus 2 in the first bracket and x minus 6 in the second bracket. And to solve it, if we equate each bracket to 0, first, x is going to be equal to 2, and the second solution is x is equal to 6. For number 2, we have to factorize and solve x squared plus 9x plus 20 is equal to 0. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 20, and the same two numbers need to add to give us 9. So looking at the factors of 20, we've got 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And the ones that also add to give 9 are 4 and 5. So we can now factorize this equation as x plus 4 in the first bracket and x plus 5 in the second bracket. And to solve, we put it equal to 0. So x will be equal to negative 4 and x will be equal to negative 5. For number 3, we are factorizing and solving y squared minus 6y is equal to 7. So we cannot do this as it is because our quadratic equation is not equal to 0. So in order to make it equal to 0, we're going to have to minus 7 on both sides. So we will have y squared minus 6y minus 7. On the right-hand side, we will now have equal to 0. So we're now looking for two numbers that multiply to give us minus 7 and add to give us minus 6. So the factors of 7 are just 1 and 7. And because we are multiplying to get a negative number and adding to get a negative number, that means the bigger factor would have to be negative. And 1 times negative 7 gives us negative 7 and also adds to give us negative 6. So to factorize this, we can write this as y plus 1 and y minus 7. To solve it, we put it equal to 0, and this will give us solutions of y is equal to minus 1 and y is equal to 7. For number 4, we also have to factorize and solve, but as we can see, this equation is not equal to 0. So in order to make it equal to 0, we can try and make the right-hand side equal to 0. So we're going to do the inverse of everything on the right-hand side. So we're going to minus 6a squared on both sides. We are going to minus 7a on both sides and plus 26. So 7a squared minus 6a squared gives us a squared. There is no a term on the left-hand side, so we're just going to write minus 7a. And minus 56 plus 26 gives us minus 30. And this is now all equal to 0. So this means we are looking for two numbers that multiply to give us minus 30, and the same two numbers need to add to give us minus 7. And the two numbers that we're going to use for this is negative 10 and 3. So we can now factorize this as a minus 10 in the first bracket and a plus 3 in the second bracket. And this is equal to 0. So to solve it, a is going to be equal to 10 and a is equal to minus 3.